Let's continue German week with Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet. Of course, I could be talking about his poetry, but I don't know it well enough to do that. I've only ever read his Duino elegies, which are considered one of the high points of his career, but I read those 20 years ago. And I don't know about you, but if I read something 20 years ago and I haven't reviewed my notes, it feels like I've never really read it. With these, I read more recently than that, and they marked me forever. And his views on art and poetry and how to live and love in this world are just so profound. And it makes sense that he was giving back to a younger poet. He was writing to Franz Krappus, this military cadet who sent his poetry to Rilke. And Rilke just kept writing this guy letters for years about the purpose of poetry, the purpose of art, how he does his own thing. And Rilke was known as the poet of solitude. He would disappear for months at a time to work on his poetry, sometimes take years to finish off a piece before he would release it. And here he is giving back to this young poet who couldn't help him at all. And it's a beautiful thing, and it also makes sense because I think that was something that marked Rilke as well. A little bit of his background is, for one, he was in love with this married woman, and she had studied under Freud. And so from her, he learned about psychoanalysis. And psychoanalysis was just, it's hard to, I think, understand how much that was changing the world when it came out. This idea of the subconscious and the unconscious and all these emotions roiling under the surface that we don't even know are happening, but affect our behavior. And so this also crept into his poetry as well. And so he's learning from this woman. With her, he traveled to Russia. And in Russia, he got to meet Tolstoy. And apparently meeting Tolstoy just marks you forever. Tolstoy had this giant white beard. He's one of the greatest writers of all time. He would take all comers. He believed in communal living. I mean, he was just a living saint. And so meeting Tolstoy was a really big deal for Rilke, as well as traveling to Russia. And then he wants to go to France and learn about Rodin and write about Rodin. And Rodin is my favorite sculptor of all time. And so not only did he interview Rodin, he became Rodin's secretary. He got to sit and live with this guy who has one of the best ways of viewing the world of anyone who ever lived. And so he learned from Rodin as well. Then unfortunately Rilke returns to Germany, and World War I breaks out of nowhere. And no one saw it coming. Borders closed. He's trapped there. Has to work in the War Office. Everything he owned in France gets sold off. It's a terrible thing and almost ruined him as a poet. But eventually he gets out of it and gets to continue his career. But this continues that process of learning from others and giving back. And that's what makes this so cool. This young guy, Krappus, couldn't help Rilke at all, but he spent years writing to him about the most important things in his life. And I think if you read it, you'll get something really beautiful and profound out of it too.